He's Dave, and I'm Dallas, and we have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes they're on point, and sometimes they go down better with a glass of wine. Join us. This is the Wine and Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wine and the Podcast, where we pair wine with entertainment, delude ourselves into thinking you want to hear what we have to say about different pieces of pop culture and art, but know for a fact that you need to hear what we have to say about wine, because, man, who knows anything about wine? We sure don't. Well, that's not true. We actually totally do, and we can help you find the perfect pairing for whatever it is you're planning to read, watch, or listen to. For example, today we're going to tell you what you can pair with Batman Returns from 1992. But before we get started, please make sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. It does help this podcast grow and reach new listeners. And please leave a rating and or review. At least do so if you love us. And you can also find us on Substack, wineand.substack.com, where you'll be the first to know when new episodes drop. Get in-depth show notes, sometimes uncut versions of these episodes, bonus pairings, articles, chats, pairing directories, wineand.substack.com. Be a cool kid. Drink the wine cooler aid. Join us on Substack. And now let's get right back into our coverage of Batman Returns from 1992, the best Batman movie ever made. Says all three of us. Wait, all three? I thought it was just you, Dallas and Dave. So on that note, actually, today we have a very special guest, Sir Richard Fairgray, comic book creator extraordinaire, who has done the comics Blastosaurus, Black Sand Beach, Four Color Heroes, and under his creator-owned banner, Richard Sucks, that's S-U-X, Richard Sucks. He has released his memoir, Octopus, 3 volumes of his dirtbag soap opera, Haunted Hill, and 4-part series, Ex-Wives of Frankenstein. And issue number 4, the final issue of Ex-Wives of Frankenstein, is currently being crowdfunded on Kickstarter as we speak. Just go to kickrichard.com, spelled exactly like it sounds, kickrichard.com, and you will go right to the Kickstarter campaign for that. The Ex-Wives of Frankenstein follow the 2 ex-wives of Frankenstein monster and Dr. Frankenstein, the 2 of them coming to terms with the fact that the monster and the doctor are both still alive and in a relationship together now. And how do these ex-wives feel about that? And how do they deal with each other in the modern world? It's kind of brilliant, and you got to take a look at this art. But you will see on the page, if you go to kickrichard.com, there will be a clickable link down below in the description of this episode as well. And you know what, guys, go listen to part 1 of this 2-part podcast so you can hear even more about Richard and get to know this conversation that we have with him about Batman Returns and why he chose to talk about Batman Returns. That's a doozy. But now let's get back to our conversation with Richard about Batman Returns. Here we go. We were talking earlier, I think before we started recording, that Tim Burton might not be the nicest person on the planet and be a bit of a mercurial ass. And one of the things that happened is Waters sent a treatment, an outline of the Catwoman idea to Burton's people, and they gave no feedback. They did nothing. So then he wrote the script and sent them the script, and they simply wrote back, "It's too much like the outline."
Jesus.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And never spoke to Waters about it again.
Because
So
what I read is that Waters delivers the script to the studio like the week after Batman Forever comes out, and they're like, "No, absolutely!" Like, because it's Catwoman. From what I understand, it's Catwoman has one life left by the end of Batman Returns, so she's gone off to live her life in essentially a city full of superheroes, and then surprisingly patriarchy is a problem there too, and she has to go against them.
It's meant to be a little bit like The Boys, where the superheroes are dicks. Like, they're the ones who are causing all the problems, and she comes into this, and he put it in like the desert, like sun-drenched desert. So he took her completely out of the Gotham atmosphere and took her somewhere hot, sunny, arid, and like, let's put Catwoman in the last place, like Las Vegas, I think it was, and let's put her somewhere like completely opposite and have her be more the hero than the heroes in that, by being the anti-hero. But yeah, he saw Michelle Pfeiffer. He has a fun anecdote where he's like, I saw Michelle Pfeiffer at some like awards ceremony buffet kind of a thing many years later, and like the only thing she could say to me was, why why? Like, why didn't this happen? Because she needed it so bad and wanted it so bad at the time. And he's like, it fell apart in way, like, apparently the communication just wasn't there. Burton's people never really got back to him after that. He didn't really try to pursue it. And it was a shame. He really wanted to see it happen, but due to these sort of unspoken politics between the groups, it was something that was just let go of. And
that's such a shame, because like Pfeiffer, obviously, like, big movie star, has had an incredibly good run up to Batman Returns, but she's like, she hasn't been anything since like 89 at that point, right? Like, she's faded. And then after Batman Returns, she becomes a sexual awakening for 85% of the world.
Right.
And then, like, she is just in film after film every year, I think, until like mid 2000s, right?
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I remember her 90s work. I might have lost track of what she was doing even by the mid 2000s, but yeah, very likely. I remember 90s. She was one of the A-list actresses of the 90s, no question.
And because Dangerous Minds is like 1 year later, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that was a follow-up.
Like, again, another film entirely defined at this point by its soundtrack, but like so different from Catwoman, and showing that she can like have this incredible range that isn't just obviously the range between Selina and Catwoman as these very interesting characters who fundamentally hate each other. My favorite part of the psychology. And like highlighting to Batman that he actually does love himself a little bit and making him feel guilty for it, which I think is so interesting. But yeah, so that was the tangent on the action figure that, and I brought this up with you before we started recording, but the thing that, like, I think is during the Wednesday press tour, Burton makes some very unfortunate comments that I do not have about not liking to put black people in his films. And I don't remember them that clearly, but it's essentially like, it seems to be, in his mind, it's an aesthetic thing, and it's fine for him to say really dumb racist shit like that. But it's really interesting when you look at it in the context of, he fought for two prominent black actors to play prominent comic book characters in a major franchise. A thing that, like, I think we all know, when that happens even today, there is such a huge pushback from the audience that it is a fight, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And he gets shut down by the studio both times. I mean, yes, he didn't really want Robin to become Robin, but he wanted to, like, he had promised. There is some story where he actually is the one who promised Billy D. Williams, like, he talks him into being in Batman and says, like, you're not going to be a main character in this film, but we will pay you very well, and you will get to be a main character in the next one because you're going to become Two-Face. And then he has to go to and say, hey, I'm really sorry. The studio says you can't be Two-Face.
Right.
So for him to have had that kind of turnaround in a film, like, we can talk about Burton's aesthetic becoming more rigorously Hot Topic exclusive by this stage. But, like, you're right. Beetlejuice establishes that look. He is, and Batman Returns is 100% a beautiful Burton film.
Yes, it is.
So it just seems like it's so rare that someone publicly becomes more racist over time, you know?
Or yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics of the case, and but I do recall the conversation around this when it happened, and lots of sort of opposing opinions and perspectives and POVs and you know, people coming out of the woodworks and saying, you know, well, he's always been this way, and other people saying he's so pro diversity, whatever. But it doesn't shock me. It's not shocking either way. We see so little of the actual conversations these people have concerning anything that you know, it's all kind of taken in a vacuum. But maybe he is a racist piece of crap, or maybe he had a moment, who knows,
or just doesn't give it a lot of thought, I think, one way or the other. I think is what it really comes down to, where it's the double-edged sword of someone having a colorblind or post-racial view of the world, where it's like, it doesn't matter to them one way or the other. It's like, sure, Robin's black, fine. Oh, you know what? I don't like how that looks on camera. Never mind, Robin's not black. You know,
I know.
It's both right. It's both not being directly racist while not caring enough about the representation and what that could mean to someone if you left them in the movie. So, and again, we don't know the ins and outs.
Which again, even that defaulting to that kind of institutional kind of weight or indifference is its own slight, as well.
I mean, this is my thesis on why Burton is a bad filmmaker today, and he wasn't a bad filmmaker back then.
Hold on, I want to. Yes,
it all hinges on this. Burton sees himself as this outsider because he was a weirdo in Burbank. He obviously did not fit in. This is what makes Edward Scissorhands a great film. It's what makes people like the weirdness of. I mean, it's like we all grew up with a crush on Lydia Deetz. But for me, just from the cartoon, because I don't like the movie. But like Burton understands what it means to be an outsider. Mm-hmm. And what becomes really clear is that as soon as he starts making hundreds of millions of dollars for a studio, he's no longer an outsider. He's fully endorsed. He's allowed to do anything he wants. And he keeps making films about being an outsider. This is the stand-up comedy of Ellen when she's talking about being relatable. It's just, it falls flat and hollow. And what happens, and this happens to a lot of people in any kind of like, anyone who considers themselves an outsider will at some point decide that they are an outsider in a specific way, and then they have a choice to either say, and other people are outsiders in different ways than me, or they go, I'm the only kind of outsider there is, and therefore, and shut down the rest of it. And you look at everything Burton did, I think that like, up to Mars Attacks, I think he's making, including Mars Attacks, by the way, I think he's making great films. And then you have this like, from Planet of the Apes onwards, you see this like decline and this mid period and of him just like making films that young Tim Burton wouldn't. Yeah, like.
I think he's making movies in the second half of his career. You know what I mean? Like he's.
Well, can I also?
He's making general.
Go ahead, Beth, sorry.
He's making general content, I think, in the second half of his career, which again it mirrors precisely what you're saying. It's like that outsider perspective, that energy, that kind of fuel of being an outsider, an authentic outsider, allows you to tap into sort of, visuals and things and themes that aren't necessarily, commonplace. And so there's a kind of ideological kind of fuel behind it. And by the time he gets to his second half of his career, I think he's cashing checks.
I mean, I am a big defender of Big Fish and Big Eyes, and I think that Dumbo is genuinely showing some signs that he is he still has some juice there. But again, it's Danny DeVito bringing the heat.
It's all DeVito.
I don't know if you guys have seen Beetlejuice. I have, and admittedly, I've never made it through the first film, so I'm coming in a little cold on it. I think it shows that Tim Burton might have what it takes to make a good film again one day, but this was not it. And I think that like he might have actually found what it means to be like out of touch again, or what it feels like to be like aging out of something, and maybe that's reigniting something for him. So I'm gonna make one.
Okay, sorry. There's this thing that happens with these auteurs, right? Because he is an auteur. Outsider, yes, okay. But he's an auteur.
The thing I keep almost interjecting, well, I'll let you finish here, but yes, it's about the auteur.
Yes.
But go ahead, Dallas.
It's this thing that happens with auteurs. They come from these sort of outsider perspectives sometimes, and so there is a world that they are trying to realize in their own minds, and then put in front, even if it's an emotional world or a thematic world, and put into film, onto film. And when that becomes successful, when you become the go-to guy for that aesthetic or that world or that style or that genre, I think you end up just trying to replicate the old magic. And for me, with Tim Burton, I think that's why the second half of his career is just sort of because a lot of it is just him trying to replicate that old magic. And what I would like to see is a complete and utter departure from this thing that the world has told you you're so good at.
Right.
That's when I think the auteur can return.
I'm going to go a little further with that even, because if you look at his short films before he even made a feature film, like his style, like what he was interested in putting on screen was so blatantly apparent even then. And Burton is like, he was infamous at the time for being that person where it's like, I'm not interested in X, Y. Like you bring him anything, he's like, no, not that, not that. I have to make it interesting to me, but interesting to him consistently became the same fucking thing over and over and over again. And I think you have so many permutations of that are just enough of a permutation. And this is all you, this is authentically you, so it's new to the rest of the world, right? You're showing them this thing, this version of creativity that only you could do. But after 7 of them, right, it becomes like, okay, that was a great run. And I think that period, that prolific period all the way up to Mars Attacks, he was consistently developing the ones that came later while he was working on the ones he was working on then. So there was this bleed through. When you watch the opening scene of Batman Returns with the parents of the Cobblepots dumping Danny DeVito baby into the river, the music, the setting, the whole energy, it's so Nightmare Before Christmas. That could have been a moment. You're waiting for them to break out into song about dumping their baby into the river. It's like, I was watching this and I was like, oh my God.
That was a character study for Nightmare Before Christmas. Absolutely. 100%.
Well, and just the whole aesthetic. I'm like, he's literally like, these movies came out just enough apart when you're younger. A year is a much longer period of time than when you're an adult. So a year goes by and you forget that you just watched this movie the year before. And as an adult, I do think Burton got to the point where he wasn't interested enough. I think Ed Wood was his one true departure, the one true, like, I'm going to do something different. But he had done Black and White before. I think that was the one and only departure he could truly bring himself to be interested in, was sort of the movies he grew up with and giving an homage to that. And then he just lost. He had no more ideas, and he wasn't interested enough in pushing himself beyond those ideas. I think, to Richard's point, though, Big Eyes might have been the only one that was a bit.
Even that, it was, the aesthetic was just brighter.
Well, but the aesthetic was like, here's the thing: in all of the early films, there is a character who is Tim Burton, right? Edward is Tim Burton. The Kid and Vincent is Tim Burton. The Penguin and Bruce Wayne are both Tim Burton. Especially Bruce Wayne in this one, not so much in the first one. That's why the first one falls flat. And then you start getting these things where, like, Tim Burton cannot relate to the Tim Burton character in his own film because he is not the outsider. He cannot be. And so you get, like, with Ed Wood, it's clearly a film about, like, how he felt about Vincent Price, right? Like, the entire relationship with Bella is he's like, I can relate to this guy. I am like Ed Wood. This is how I feel. You have to remember that the reason Vincent exists is because Disney were like, your shit is too weird. We do not understand what you're doing. We can see that you're talented. If we give you money, will you go away and make something alone? And he did. But like they couldn't. It's that feeling he has of people keep telling him, here it is. Here is the key to success. Here is the thing that you can do. You've done well. Here's a fucking cookie. And then they pull the rug out from under him when he does it too much. And so he is now, I know what a Tim Burton movie looks like. It looks like Dark Shadows. I can lay that skin across anything else I do. And
his whole style is no longer an outsider style. Right. I mean, like, even the Tim Burton feeling, that Tim Burton tone, what he does is like, okay, Tim, it's not the 80s anymore. It's not even the 90s anymore. Like, you are an established style. You're not even weird by any stretch of the imagination anymore. Like, nothing you want to do is weird to the mainstream public, and yet you're trying to treat it like it's all weird outsider goth. And it's like, no, man, you are as mainstream as it gets, a version of outsider goth that is as mainstream as it gets because you succeeded.
Which is the emotional core of Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is that the, like, Lydia being viewed by her daughter as a complete sellout and a hack is the only part that really feels worthwhile.
That's cool. All right, so getting back a little bit into the Batman Returns specifically, let's talk about Catwoman a little bit, that character, because for me, as like, Penguin and Catwoman are this movie, no question about that. But let's give Catwoman a little bit of love here. So in terms of pre-production and production, Michelle Pfeiffer was actually originally cast as Vicky Vale. In the first Batman, the studio wanted her to be Vicky Vale, but Keaton and Pfeiffer were having a relationship at the time, and Keaton was at the same time trying to patch things up with his wife, Oopsie.
That's right.
So basically, he put the kibosh on Pfeiffer's casting there because he's like, that's going to be too awkward. I'm trying to patch things up at home. I'm trying to like almost bow out of the me and Michelle relationship at this point because I want to make things work with my wife. So that did not happen. Originally, though, Tim Burton for Batman Returns offered the role to Annette Bening, who was well respected, but not as well known as some of the other contenders who were Madonna and Cher. So shortly after being cast, though, Bening discovered she was pregnant and decided to bow out. At this time, Keaton was properly divorced, so that didn't work out with his wife. And so Pfeiffer was able to be offered the part. He decided it would not be awkward to work next to her in a role like this. And she accepted on the condition that she was paid $3 million, which was 3 times what Annette Bening had been offered, and the studio gave it to her. So more power to Michelle there. As for Keaton, he only returned thanks to Burton returning, plus getting a massive pay raise. He got $12 million for the role, which was apparently a very big hike from what he got for the first Batman. He also demanded most of his dialogue be cut out of Daniel Waters' script. Something that Waters has since said that Keaton, quote, was absolutely right about. So apparently Waters had all these speeches that he gave Keaton and gave Batman, and Keaton was like, Batman wouldn't say any of this. Like, he would just one line here, one line there. So part of the reason that Keaton and Batman feel so absent from this film, not just because, they almost somewhat, they literally are until about halfway through that scene with Selena Kyle and Keaton at Bruce Wayne Manor. That's like the very beginning of him being a character in this movie, because then the relationship between him and Selena Kyle and Catwoman becomes a much more back and forth thing. But for a lot of the movie, like every time he would have said a lot, he's like, just this one line, forget the rest, cut the rest out. So his dialogue is very, very minimal throughout.
It's literally, I think his first dialogue is 38 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
By the way,
he just has looks and grunts and things like that.
Great dialogue,
doesn't say anything.
Some great dialogue and one-liners and zingers in this thing, man. And yes, but go on, Dan. More Catwoman.
So one of the very famous tidbits about this movie that most people know at this point is Pfeiffer had to be vacuum sealed into her Catwoman suit, meaning she could only be in it for short periods of time before she became lightheaded and possibly passed out. So she also worked out and trained with the whip for months prior to shooting, which is how she was able to use the whip in long, unbroken shots, such as when she beheads a number of mannequins in a row and the camera never cutting away. That is actually her whipping the heads off. That is not a special effect where they're like, some mechanism popping the heads off as she pretends to throw the whip or anything. Is like she was actually whipping those heads off. The Gotham City sets were so vast that they were spread across 7 sound stages at the Warner Brothers lot, the largest of which had 70-foot ceilings. It was reported that at least 50% of the Warner Brothers lot was taken up by the Gotham City sets at the time. The sets were all constructed to be mobile and were often moved between days of filming. They were so large and vast that Pfeiffer routinely became lost on the way to filming every single day. Now, Penguin and Danny DeVito. So Richard said he was on board before Tim Burton even came back to Batman, which is interesting. There are some articles that claim... Now, Waters did write the script with DeVito in mind. I did read that. It is one of the truly, fully, straight-up dramatic roles, not comedic in any way, shape, or form, or not meant to be. And the actor apparently stayed in character on set at all times during the filming of this. Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
God,
so Tim Burton, I read Tim Burton convinced DeVito to play the Penguin. Maybe it was, convincing DeVito to like, okay, we're coming in with a whole new version than what Sam Hamm was going to do. Because the Sam Hamm version was traditional. Like, he's a gangster, with a top hat and a monocle and an umbrella.
Not named Oswald Cobblepot.
Exactly. Maybe. So, but Tim Burton convinced DeVito to play this version of the Penguin by creating, he said he wasn't going to be strictly faithful to the Penguin of the comics. And again, as we just said, he was just a gangster character, kind of a pretty boring character for the most part. But Burton had the role written in a way that provided DeVito the opportunity to showcase his dark humor while also allowing him to completely transform into a grotesque supervillain that in no way resembled his real self. DeVito was further convinced because of the tragic angle that his character received. At the beginning of production, the director showed DeVito a painting he had made that was inspired by his vision of the Penguin. It showed a toddler version of Oswald with flippers instead of hands sitting in front of a circus tent. The caption to the painting read, quote, "My name is Jimmy, but my friends just call me the hideous Penguin Boy," unquote.
That's a good
DeVito
tattoo.
thought
Sorry,
the painting.
that's a good tattoo.
DeVito thought the painting represented how this iteration of the Penguin, along with as a whole Batman Returns, was more emotionally complex than anything he could have imagined before from the comics alone. Burton gave DeVito the chance to play contrasting depths of feeling, great anger at his abandonment, as well as the intense desire to belong to the world that tossed him aside. Once DeVito agreed to portray the Penguin in Batman Returns, he was fervent in his dedication to the role. He would stay in character for the entire time throughout filming, and Burton even hired a circus-like cart to take the actor to and from the set. Not only did DeVito eat large amounts of raw fish for the role, but he also spent hours in the makeup chair.
That makes so much
each
sense
day.
now with that scene. With that scene with him and the fish.
Yep. Well, because you look at it and you're like, that's a real
Right.
fish. I'm
I'm like,
pretty
that's
sure
a
he's
real
eating
fish.
actual fish
Yeah.
flesh. Yeah, that is fascinating. The movie could ultimately be criticized for being too gross and overstuffed with too many Batman villains, yet no one can deny Danny DeVito made the role of the Penguin entirely his own in Tim Burton's Batman Returns, delivering a portrayal as bizarre as it was tragic. A total of 30 African penguins and 12 king penguins were used during filming. The rest of the penguins featured a mix of CGI, robots, and even people in penguin suits. I believe those final giant penguins that take DeVito's body into the water, those are people in suits. The production team wanted to use king penguins, but the only tame ones in captivity were located in a bird sanctuary in the Cotswolds in the UK. These penguins were flown to the US in a refrigerated hold of a plane. The penguins were given their own refrigerated trailer and swimming pool, with half a ton of fresh ice being delivered every day. Along with fresh fish coming direct from the docks, they also had their own around-the-clock bodyguard. A newspaper reported that the total refrigeration bill for keeping the penguins comfortably cool was $1 million. The birds must have enjoyed their experience on a big-budget blockbuster, because most of them mated and produced eggs during the course of filming, something penguins only do when they are happy.
Vacation does it every time.
No penguins were even upset during the filming of Batman Returns, let alone harmed, apparently. So then we get to Max Schreck. Singer and actor David Bowie was the first choice of the role for Max Schreck, having previously been considered to play the Joker in Batman. He may have seriously considered taking the role of Schreck, but ultimately took a role in David Lynch's Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me instead. Christopher Walken ended up in the hot seat, but casting director Marion Doherty said that Burton was uncomfortable with Walken. He told Doherty, quote, "That man scares the hell out of me," unquote. However, they seem to have gotten along. He later cast Walken in Sleepy Hollow as well in 1999. He was also cast to play Brainiac in Burton's aborted Superman Lives project. So Walken and, I mean, you can see Walken and Burton getting along. I'm sorry, Burton's got to get a good thrill out of having an actor scare the hell out of him. I'm sure he meant that as a compliment, deep down. So Batman Returns has a very distinctive look. It's a deliberate reference to the short-lived Weimar Republic that existed from 1919 to 1993 in Germany. During this period, German Expressionism was a cinematic movement that thrived. The Penguin's appearance and outfit are based on the title character from The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a German Expressionist film from 1920. A lot of the scenery and set design for Batman Returns were also inspired by the same film, and Max Schreck is the name of German Expressionist star Max Schreck, who starred in Nosferatu in 1922 as the Nosferatu. The references to the Weimar Republic don't stop there. In the film, Schreck makes a suggestion to the Penguin to make a Reichstag fire. Those who know their history will know the events surrounding the burning of the historic German government building, which was perceived as a terrorist act that the Nazi Party used as a pretext to seize political control. All right. That's my notes on Batman Returns as far as the history and the production and all that fun stuff. So final thoughts on this movie, guys. For me personally, I'm just going to say, this might be my number one Batman film of all time. I'd have to rewatch The Dark Knight one more time to make sure, but I am pretty sure. I think I appreciate this one even more than The Dark Knight. one way or the other, just because it is such a unique superhero movie. All the creative people involved, I think, really knew what they were making and were all in on what they were making, and it sings. No one feels like they're out of place. No one feels like they're at odds with the rest of the film, and yeah, it's such a harmonious piece. Even though it over 2 hours long for a 1992 movie, that was an overlong movie. A lot of people watch this movie and feel it's overlong. I did not feel it at all. I was like, every fucking scene, I was just like, more. My God, what is next? I almost wanted this to be a show, like a series that just goes on for hours and hours and hours, and I could just keep coming back to. This is a fascinating version of Batman and this world and all these themes and characters. Yeah, so that's what I got. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, the good news for you is that you can go back to it for hours and hours with the TV series Gotham, which from season 2 onwards becomes far more like Batman Returns, and I argue becomes a pretty enjoyable show. That first season's rough. It's a tough hang, but season 2 onwards it really does. Max Schreck is such an interesting character for me. I'm not going to claim I'm an expert on Christopher Walken and his career, but I think that basically, like we can all do an impression of Christopher Walken, right? Like everyone has that up their sleeve.
Oh, mine's bad, but yeah.
Mine sounds like Bill Cosby.
My point but we know what he sounds like, and I think that Batman Returns is kind of the tipping point where Walken stops being a serious actor and becomes a character actor because he's comedic in this role. Right. And I think that what reinforces it, and again, this is coming from 36 views and 4 of them in the past week, is Andrew Bernarski playing his son.
Yes.
Most notable as Zangief from Street Fighter, obviously. Or, I mean, if anyone wants to look up Andrew Bernarski's fun comments about the death of Gunnar Hansen.
Oh, no.
I think the term suck my dead nuts comes up. Interesting guy. He is doing a Walken impression in that role.
Yes, he is.
And
I loved it too.
It's so funny to think of like, okay, look, we all sound a little bit like our parents, but like, did he never meet anyone else in his entire life? And he grew to that enormous size.
No other influences whatsoever.
And obviously they're very close. Like the only humanity that Max Schreck has is when he when Chip says to him like, "No, Dad, run," and like he stands in his way. Max pauses before he runs away and gets caught by the Penguin, right?
Right.
And then later he actually says, "Take me instead." He actually, it's the only humanity he has in the entire film. So I think it's just worth like highlighting what an interesting character he becomes, and also how like willing he is to roll with the punches when he sees that Selina is alive, and it's just like, I guess I'll throw her on fire.
That was a brilliant scene. That was just a fantastic scene.
Well, I think it's one of those things where, as a CEO, as a let's call him a billionaire, I suppose. Probably he is. The character is meant to be that rich, but as that type of character, where they always have that one thing they care about, or that very small handful of things they're authentically emotional about. In his case, it was lineage, right? So he's like, my son. Like, I'm already old. Like, the lineage matters more than me personally. For whatever reason, this Max Schreck character does believe that through and through. Now, he's still willing, like, for the lineage, it has to be his empire and his lineage. And it has to be, so even at the very end, he's willing to kill anyone, do anything, say anything to let that lineage continue to come out on top. But he doesn't care that much per se about his own life as long as that lineage keeps going, which is fascinating, but I think is true for people that are human beings that get to those levels, that ascend to those perches, whether it's royalty, political power, money. It's like their humanity isn't gone. It's just, it's so pinpoint focused on such a small number of things that everything else goes out the window, but then that one thing is still their humanity.
Well, I mean, there's the line where he says, "This power plant is my legacy," right? And there's the line when he's forgotten his speech and he has to make it up, and he says he's been introduced as like Gotham's own Santa Claus, and he says, "I'm not Santa Claus, I'm just a portion of God lucky."
Yeah. Oh, good line.
I mean, like, what if we were to look at this from, like, this is three different kinds of wealth, right? Bruce Wayne is generational wealth, and he's using that to do good. Oswald Cobblepot obviously would have been generational wealth, but had it taken away from him when he ate a fucking cat from the cage he was kept in as a baby. And then Max Schreck is someone who has, if he's being honest there, he's come from nothing and built himself up, and now he's trying to use the business as a legacy, and he needs his, I would say that, like, to use the common parlance of the present day, his fail son, that is Chip. He wants to, like, position him there to say, like, look, you would never be able to do the thing that I've done. I want to buy our family into this generational wealth. That's, you know, like, he believes he can buy political power. He believes but it is about establishing that to make sure that maybe he'll have a good grandson one day, because it certainly ain't going to be Chip doing anything worthwhile.
It is interesting, though, thinking of Bruce Wayne versus Max Schreck. Like, Bruce Wayne is someone who, in this movie, we almost never see him leave Wayne Manor as Bruce Wayne, right? It's like he does one meeting with Max Schreck in his office and the party at the end. And if he leaves Wayne Manor, it's in Batman suit. It's in armor, right? Where he does not experience life with other people. He does not experience life with humanity or the city, or he feels for them and tries to do good things in terms of protecting them, so on and so forth, but he does not live amongst them.
Lucky
like he will not be
well, he's sitting there, like, the rest of Gotham are at a tree lighting ceremony, and he is sitting doing nothing in the dark, waiting for the bat symbol to come on, and the look he has of, like, fuck yeah, it's my time to shine.
Right.
When that happens. Like, that's all
he's
he does
mission
now.
driven. He's mission focused and mission driven.
He is, and, like, I mean, and then that reflected obviously at the party. I overthink this film, I'm sorry, but at the party, really notable, the only two people there not wearing masks are Selina and Bruce.
Right.
Yes.
We are their masks.
Well, they even have the line, "I'm tired of wearing masks, me too." Right? I mean, they say that to each other.
They say that to each other, but they, at the point where they're actually wearing them, they're both saying, I want to be Catwoman all the time. I want to be Batman all the time.
Right.
But Selina is far more torn about it, because, you know, she looks in the store window at her reflection and says, what am I even doing?
Right.
Like,
and she's also newly empowered by the Catwoman side of her, whereas Bruce is like, I mean, he's been doing this for, you know, this is Batman Returns. He's been doing this for a while, and he's like, okay, maybe I'm tired of just being lonely at home all the time and just coming out as Batman. Whereas Selina's like, I just found myself in a way. I'm torn about it, but I haven't even fully explored what that is or what I can do. And I feel like, go ahead, Richard.
I mean, okay, sure. But I think that, like, the Catwoman persona has been there all along. It's that, like, actually facing her mortality by literally dying and having her fingers chewed at by cats makes her just say, like, no, this thing can be let loose now. Because when you see her, she uses the taser on the clown at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And she looks absolutely delighted by it. She has that in her all along.
Of course.
It's that she has denied it. And it's that, like, when Catwoman, the first time Catwoman is really out and about, and she rescues that woman from what we have to assume is going to be a sexual assault, and the woman thanks her, and she grabs her and says, you make it so easy for them, don't you? And, like, this is not her being a shitty feminist. This is not her, like, blaming a victim. This is her looking at that woman and seeing Selina Kyle. And
exactly.
Saying,
Absolutely.
But that is the point. I mean, just because you quote unquote discover a side of yourself, that doesn't mean it wasn't always there. But it is, you're letting it out and you're acknowledging it fully. Like and letting it be the dominant side of your personality for possibly the first time ever, certainly the first time ever in long periods of time, rather than just a moment here, a moment there. And that empowerment is something where, you know, Bruce Wayne Batman is basically trying to convince her to tuck it all back in. And it's like, let's leave all this behind. And she is like, one, she has unfinished business. She's not ready to do that quite, you know, it's certainly not in that moment. But then there's also the question of, like, look, you have everything you want for nothing. You've been Batman for a while. You're getting maybe a little bored with it, but every choice you've made has been a true blue choice for you.
Well,
You know,
also that he's obviously broken up with Vicky relatively recently,
Yeah.
and he's now saying like, no, I could get it right this time around if
Right.
I tore this mask off as if it was
Right.
made of actual Play-Doh. And
Right.
and by the way, Max Shrek saying, why is Bruce Wayne dressed as Batman? It's so
I
bad.
did like that.
But you also like if you were to tell me that like if they were to make a sequel to this where we had a bunch of flashbacks to show that Selena Kyle was Catwoman as a teenager for a brief period, I would buy it because it seems, you know, like all of her resentment is so there as if she's like tucked something away already. And there's this line in the film that gets a lot of criticism where Selena says to Bruce, you know, they're saying Catwoman weighs 140
Oh yeah,
pounds.
great scene. Another
Mhm,
great scene. Another intimate little great scene.
And it's wonderful. And but a lot of people like shit on that line because she makes some noise about it. And people think, or a lot of people seem to take it as like her being upset that they would say that Catwoman weighed that much. And I don't see it as that. I see it as her saying, why is that what they're focusing on? Yeah,
Right.
like, and maybe this is me looking at it from 2024 perspective, but like, if I would definitely say that if I saw that in a newspaper, I'd be like, oh, I can't believe they're saying this. And I would obviously mean, why is this the thing they're talking about? Not Catwoman ain't that heavy.
Right.
But by the way, in the film, it actually does cut away during the whip scene. She hits 3, it cuts away, it does a close up for him before it cuts back. It's one of the most upsetting cuts in the world because you can find the full version of it where she just stands there and does all 4 in a row.
That's so
yeah.
sad.
And speaking of
the 3, I was talking about the Unbroken is the 3,
Yes,
but yes, it is weird that they thought it would be too boring to just have the camera not cut and do something in the final bit. Anyway, go ahead, Doc.
The one-liners, the zingers in this film. They're just like lasers, man. They just wash right over you, but they turn around and cut you right down the middle. My favorites are DeVito's first line. Actually, is I believe the word you're looking for is It just that line didn't hit me the first few times I saw this film, and watching it the other day, I paused it and I was like, wait, hold on. Is he saying Because I really couldn't understand what he was saying. And so I rewound it and I was like, oh, okay, that's just brilliant, man. That's just good writing, as I say, good writing. It's so good. But the dialogue is so perfectly campy. It is, I think the campiest thing about this film is the dialogue. And but
it's also it's campy while being authentically witty.
Absolutely.
And like you said, cutting.
Those things are possible.
There is
Absolutely.
that intelligence to it, which is what lets this rise above your standard superhero movie with clever humor.
It's motivated by character. That's what's
humor.
funny. The camp is motivated by character, which is the kind of secret sauce. It's like, because you can have camp, anything can be campy. Just throw some glitter on it, you know. But to have that thing motivated by character, that's when it really truly sings. And walking away from this film, I do think this is, for me, by a long shot, the best film in the entire franchise. Sorry.
I mean, it's at worst the second best, and I think it's probably the best for me too. So, and the franchise is only what 4, 3, 1, so 8 movies long. Yeah,
for sure.
If you don't count the TV movie,
I think that this. You have to count Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Oh, I see. You're right.
And then because of that, you'd have to count Justice League.
Yeah, okay.
And
I don't know about Justice League. As a Batman movie, I'm going to skip Justice League. I feel like that's too much of a stretch. At least Batman v Superman, he's one of the 2 leads. True. So I'm like, that's cool. That's cool. But the Justice League, that's like saying Avengers has to be a Thor movie. It's like, I don't know about that.
Right, but you would never say that Thor was one of the top 3 Avengers, would you?
Right. I get what you're saying, Richard. Yeah.
Batman is
I wouldn't even call the Avengers movies a Captain America movie. Like, it's an Avenger movie or an Iron Man movie per se, even though they are the main leads of the team. But there is always such a distinction between what a story and what writers and what the tone of a movie that's just about Tony Stark and a movie that's about the team. And so, but I will give you Batman vs Superman. I think that's fair.
I mean, again, I'm going to put that at the bottom of the franchise for me, but this one obviously far and away the best.
Agreed.
Absolute masterpiece. I think I always put Batman Begins over Dark Knight.
Just not me. I do not like Batman Begins.
I think that my big complaint about it is the story is too much of a straight line. But I really like that exploration more than Dark Knight, which feels, honestly, if Dark Knight didn't have the boat, I'd be happy. I'd be much happier, and maybe I would knock it up. But for me, it goes this, Batman Begins, The Flash, and then Dark Knight.
Okay.
The Flash?
Yeah. I mean, I argue that's a Batman movie. Michael Keaton is the strongest part of it. He's very good.
I'm sitting here going, wait, I guess I didn't see The Flash. I was like, no, just your description of it as a Batman film. But yeah, I guess, okay, I see what you're saying.
I mean, I will probably never see The Flash. I just can't bring myself to care enough.
Yeah. It's just that it's very good. It's just that it's genuinely a very good film with really good characterization.
Okay, calm down, Richard. Calm down.
Really? You are the only person to have said that.
Look, no, it is. Like, I don't like the Flash TV series. I think, it's very dull. I think that the Flash movie, Michael Keaton is so good, but also Ezra Miller, despite being a very problematic person in real life, they do a very good job of playing these two versions of Barry Allen where the lesson of it is, if this character doesn't have massive tragedy in his life, he's a fucking asshole. And that's such an interesting take. I think it's worth talking for a second, at least, just about how much influence Batman Returns has over all other Batman beyond it, because that's never really that doesn't happen from the first film. Like, this, as much as people derided this film and made fun of it in the early days and having a silly title, this is a film where, like, the animated series is Batman Returns as an animated series. The Penguin fundamentally changes because of this film. Catwoman changes because of this film. Gotham is this film, done by worse people or less talented people, but is still absolutely, like, exploring this kind of tonality.
I would even argue Harley Quinn came about because of Catwoman's power in this film, as being, like, if you have someone like the Penguin, you need someone like a Catwoman, and Joker needs a Harley Quinn. I see a lot of this version of Catwoman in a Harley Quinn character.
I guess you are right, Richard. In those subsequent films, you do see the DNA of this film in virtually every film that's come after it. So I guess that makes sense.
And the Schumacher films take every wrong lesson from it. The Nolan films, I think, take mostly the right ones. But
that's a good point.
This is the film that this is the text that defines Batman moving forward. Are either of you big enough nerds to know if the Penguin being called Mr. Boniface in the Sam Hamm script, is that from something else, or is that just Sam Hamm being like, Oswald Cobblepot's a hard name?
Mr. Boniface. That is a cool. I'm gonna Google that while you keep.
They
on
do
talking.
him as this, like, he's sort of. It starts with him in Arkham. He's like he has all these birds. He has gadgets. He gets let out, and then he triggers something that makes his cellmate get killed by pigeons. And then it's just him going off and, like, looking for these old ravens. This movie, it would have sucked. Sam Hamm should be in actual prison or space or somewhere where he's not allowed near film sets.
Golden Age Penguin was Abner Boniface.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh. That is cool. Also, like, the Batmobile is defined by this movie. Like, there's never been a cooler Batmobile, and every Batmobile since this has been largely based on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tumblr tries to reinvent it, but, like, once Tumblr got rid of the gay porn, no one used it anymore.
All right, guys. Well, that is Batman Returns. Now, of course, the most important question on this podcast: what are we drinking while watching Batman Returns? Richard, what do you drink with this beloved movie?
Okay. If this is a Christmas movie that you're watching at Christmas time, I would pair this with a Pinot Noir. The more acidic, the better, because you are going to be eating a lot of Christmassy foods and you want something to cut through it, right? If you are watching this film any other time of the year when you're eating normal foods, You want something that'll make you feel like you're having that warm, heavy from the inside experience. And I would say mix it with whatever your favorite, as I I'm good with my terms around wine, your favorite carpety Merlot. Because I believe a good heavy Merlot will always feel like actual carpet being put down on your insides. And that will make you feel the hug from within that the penguin needs.
All right. You really do just you want to wrap the penguin up in your arms and comfort him.
Yeah, have a nice cozy evening.
Cool.
Look, if I would love him unconditionally, he would become better. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
This would probably be true. It's like a rescue cat. You know, they've been beat up, they've been abandoned, they're distrustful, they hate everybody. You show them love, and man, they bond with you. Wrong animal. I shouldn't be like Catwoman and cats, but I'm going. I got to go with the cat.
You went down a little rabbit hole.
Anyway, Dallas, what are you doing? I know.
I'm really sorry to go back to the film for just a second, but we really need to remember that the final line of the film is when Bruce Wayne wishes a Merry Christmas to men and women.
Yes. Oh, and yeah. I was trying to remember. There was some distinction between the two scripts on Catwoman. Either I think in the original Catwoman was you see the shadow, and then they went with her like surviving in the ultimate end, where they actually show her pop up on screen, and that was not something that was that was in the original script. I think that's something the studio was like, yeah, let's let her survive, and then proceed to do fucking nothing with it.
Yeah, but that also I think is the most expensive shot in the film.
$250,000.
Yeah, because to do that shot, they didn't have Michelle Pfeiffer anymore, and they tried to get different actresses to come in because it's just the back of someone's head,
right?
And no one could pull off the Michelle Pfeiffer movement, and they had to build an animatronic Catwoman.
No way.
You know what? I believe that because the move when she pops up, it almost looks like early CGI, where it's like it's a little uncanny valley in like the way she moves when she pops up, and I'm like, that was a little inhuman the way that moved, and I thought maybe it was just the way they sort of spliced the pop up in or something, but it's an animatronic. That actually makes sense.
Okay.
All right.
See that now.
So Dallas, what do you got? What are you drinking with Batman Returns?
So I think this film is just so sexy and so well made, and it gives me everything I need. It has great character interplay, solid protagonist, interesting villains. The textures and themes are all just really well done and refined. It gives me camp. And so when I start thinking of notes that mirror all of that, I start thinking of cherries and chocolate and dark ruby and a little spice. There's a little mint on the backbone. And it's also oddly sweet. And I decided on a Shiraz. And specifically, I went with an Aussie Shiraz here. I went with this Chapel Hill Parsons Nose Shiraz from 2014. You can pick up a bottle for about $20. It is a surprisingly great bang for your buck. This is a full bottle wine, meaning you could probably go through this entire bottle without thinking too much about it.
Oh yeah, that's a danger.
It's a danger because it's succulent in it's a weird way. It's sexy, it's silky.
Will it at least last through 2 hours and 5 minutes? That is the running time of Batman Returns. Okay, perfect. As long as it can get through that, then it's great.
Yeah, so lots of plum, lots of jam, blueberry, you got the oak, there's some dark chocolate in there, raspberry, and like I said, a little mint on the backbone that kind of just invigorates. So yeah, it's a lovely little wine.
All right, beautiful. And Shiraz, for everyone who does not know out there, it is Syrah. It's just called Shiraz, or has been called Shiraz in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Usually not elsewhere, but you're right. The Shiraz word, because it's so popular, I think people like to slap it on. Why not? It's not a regional word. You can use it wherever you want, if you want to. So a lot of people are doing that. But Syrah and Shiraz, same exact thing. It just depends on what you want to call it.
as the only person from an Antipodean country, I would just like to point out we pronounce it Shiraz.
Shiraz?
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
That's because you spend all of your time in the hills. No.
This is the first time I've been on this show where a wine has been brought up that I actually know. I like the Chapel Hill Shiraz.
Yeah, it's a great little wine. It's a very drinkable wine. Very, very, very
gorgeous.
Very
Gorgeous. So I went fairly off the beaten path on this one, not with the wine choice, but with what I did with the wine. So for this movie, it is. So first, let me actually just introduce what it is. So there is a thing that Queen Victoria back in the day used to love, which was to mix Scotch into her claret.
Oh yeah.
And so that really intrigued me. I'd never heard of such a thing, but she swore by it and horrified all the wine aficionados around her by mixing Scotch and claret, which
Very
claret for everyone...
It's 300 years, by the way.
Right. And claret, by the way, guys, is just a very British word for Bordeaux red blend. So it's a Bordeaux red. So I went out. I am not a whiskey drinker. Or a Scotch drinker. I know very little about it, but I was like, fuck it. I asked one of my friends, Ryan Nichols, a fellow writer, he's a big whiskey guy. And I'm like, what's your go-to relatively affordable Scotches out there? And he turned me on to the Lafroig 10-year Scotch,
Good one.
which is at Trader Joe's for under $50, which for a full bottle of high-end Scotch is actually very good. Usually I've seen this same 10-year Lafroig for close to $100 elsewhere. It's been like $80 to $90 something, and this was $42 for the bottle of Lafroig. So I went and got that, and then I tried 2 different Bordeaux blends. I tried your big budget, also from Trader Joe's, Théâtre des Moulins, $9.99. Bordeaux red, so a nice budget Bordeaux. It's a fine Bordeaux. It's nice. It's deep. It's tannic. All the fresh fruit flavors. It is a bit of what we like to call a donut wine, not because it goes well with donuts. I mean, it might, but that's not why we call it a donut wine. But it's because wine always has a well-made, ideal wine has 3 phases of flavor. You have the attack when you first sip it and it enters your mouth. You have the mid palate where the couple of seconds you're holding it in your mouth before you swallow, and the flavor is meant to continue to develop and still be there and still very like you can notice what's happening while you're holding it in your mouth. And then the finish, the aftertaste, which then the flavor continues to develop from there. A donut wine is a wine where that mid palate is kind of non-existent. It's sort of, you can hold it in your mouth till the cows come home. It's kind of tastes like nothing and is doing nothing. And this one, this Théâtre des Moulins, is definitely a donut wine. It's got a wonderful, fierce attack, gorgeous finish, and fuck all nothing while you're just sitting there swirling it around on your gums and whatnot. So it's definitely a budget Bordeaux for $9.99 there. But I also tried this shtick with a Chateau Sainte Marguerite from the Médoc. This is a 2010 Bordeaux, so well-aged Bordeaux that I got from K&L Winery here in LA for just $19.99. So
shout out to K&L Winery, by the way. They do me right.
They do you right.
Within walking distance.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
Yes, they are, and they are so good. So they have a number of well-aged Bordeaux's up against one of their walls. Some of them are very expensive, and a lot of them are not. A lot of them are like this sort of, $15 to $35, depending. I brought this up on a lark. I was like, I want to try one more Bordeaux with this shtick. So let me take this up to the counter. And I took it up to the counter, and the guy was like, this is tasting good. Good choice. I'm like, oh, good. That was a total shot in the dark. I just sort of like blindly picked one because they had so many. And I was like, fuck, I don't know. Chateau Sainte Marguerite 2010. Great. $20. Let's do it. And this is gorgeous. So this has a lot of like leather and tobacco and just like more. It's got that nice aged wine feel. Still, the tannins are much more gentle. Now, what I did, I have a video I'm going to post on our Substack of preparing this, because all I did was I took a single pipette of whiskey, of Scotch. So about 2 milliliters of Scotch. You just put it in, take 1 pump in 1 glass of Bordeaux, squirt it in, swirl it, drink it. That was my perfect amount of Scotch in my Bordeaux. And motherfucker, I'm with Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
That was magnificent. It adds, Lafroig itself has this very peaty, A lot of people call it like the Band-Aid smell and flavor, where it's like almost like this plasticky, petroleum-y element to it that really shines in the Bordeaux. It's almost like a Riesling version of Bordeaux. Like you just have these strange petroleum-like smells and flavors that the whiskey adds. Then also the extra earthiness and the sweetness that is a part of whiskey, though it's not sugar sweet at all. Like whiskey, I'm still developing a palate for whiskey. It's still a lot for me. It's powerful. A whiskey drinker might want more than a single pipette 2 milliliter squirt into their glass, but for me that was perfect. And you get all the depth, all the tannins, all that richness of the Bordeaux. It's cut a little bit by the whiskey because whiskey is not as deep and dark. Like it's almost, it waters down the Bordeaux a touch. It actually cuts it and then adds this extra level of flavors that is now usually not present in wine at all, especially something like a deep dark red Bordeaux. And I felt like that is this Batman Returns where you have a superhero movie. So many elements superficially are a superhero movie, and then it's just cut through with these sensations and flavors and experiences that you're just like, the fuck am I watching? But you watch it and you just go deeper and deeper into it, and it harmonizes, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the show. This movie sings on every level in a way that is that lightning in a bottle element where I'm not even sure Burton could repeat it if he wanted to. It was alchemical, and it's magic. And shout out, by the way, to Joe Fattorini on Substack, who turned me on to the Queen Victoria whiskey and Bordeaux blend, because this is I'm squirting a pipette of this.
I'm telling you, Claret,
Bordeaux going forward.
Claret is funny because in some cigar circles, it's a great way to kind of treat the tip of your cigar. And sip while you're, enjoying your cigar.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's
very smoky. It's very smoky,
very
and again,
smoky.
like that tobacco element is heavily there. So that's my pairing for Batman Returns,
it's curious because Claret's interesting because it reverses that process you find in wine, where you will age a wine in a whiskey barrel or a bourbon barrel. That happens, or treat it with the wood sometimes. From those barrels, but this does kind of inverse that, and it's a great experience because that whiskey kind of rounds out the middle of the bourbon of the Bordeaux.
All right. Any last words before we sign off today? And I'll let Richard say everything about what he's got going on before we do that. But any last words on the movie, on the drinks, on anything? Going once, going twice. All right. Yeah. We're good. Richard, let our listeners know where they can find you online to follow you and what you've got going on. Shout out to Ex-Wives of Frankenstein #4, which should be going on as we speak. Go for it, Richard.
All right. Well, I'm the only Richard Fairgray in the entire world, so I'm very easy to find. I've given enough hints as to my exact location during this episode, so if you want to just come, show up,
hang out,
don't. I have like cut people out of my life who I love for showing up to my house unannounced.
Thank you. There's like a list of 2 who I'll allow. I will allow like 2 people. Okay, sure. But everyone else,
I do not have a list that long. Yeah. It's a head of whiskey allowed to show up at my house.
And the only reason you allow it is because they'll never do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Very true.
So my newest book is the finale of the Ex-Wives of Frankenstein, a 4-part comic series about Elizabeth Frankenstein and the Bride of the Monster on the day they find out their husbands are alive, living as a gay couple in the Arctic, and returning to the city as heroes of Reddit and Twitter. It is a story that looks at what it's like to be pitted against each other by every aspect of society, but knowing that right now no one else could possibly understand what you were about to be dragged back into. It is on Kickstarter from October 1st till the 22nd, I believe, and you can get to it easily. I'm sure they will include a link in the whatever is here, but also kickrichard.com is kind of my forever link to whatever I have on Kickstarter. And as I'm trying to get 300 books out before I turn 40, there's a lot of stuff going on.
So he produces them faster than you can read them. I said it once. I'm standing by that.
That's very true.
Crazy. And the quality is so good. You've got go check out his art. Go check out the comics, at least online. Like go to the website, go to the Kickstarter, take a look at what he's got going on, because it is impressive insanity, whatever word you want to use. incredible.
One and the same,
I'm,
my friend.
I'm impressed every day. Yeah, there's a reason he's always on the show. I'm always like,
Exactly.
"Sure, come back on. Let's keep talking about it. All right. So that is Richard Fairgray, everyone. And this has been another Wine And. We will be back in 1 week with another wine and entertainment pairing for your entertainment. Don't forget to check us out on Substack, wineand.substack.com. And we are on all the socials at wineandpod. So go find us there. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Check you next time.
Night,
This
guys.
has been an epically long show.
Yes,
Good
yet
night
again.
for now.
Yet again.
Ciao, ciao.
Later.